I have a question in regards to part of your presentation about jihad. And this is a quote that I read in the New York Times. It was from a Tennessee Muslim, and he murdered a soldier outside of Little Rock, Arkansas at a military recruiting station. And this is what he said. He said, "I wasn't insane or post-traumatic, nor was I forced to do this act." He said that the attack didn't go as planned. It was justified according to Islamic laws and the Islamic religion, jihad, to fight those who wage war on Islam and Muslims. And I was just wondering how his take on jihad will go with the way you define jihad in your presentation.
That last part of the statement said Islamic Muslims?
It says it said that his act was justified according to Islamic laws and the Islamic religion, jihad, to fight those who wage war on Islam and Muslims.
What are Islamic Muslims?
What's that? Islam and Muslims is what his quote says.
So, of course, a lot of these individuals that have committed these acts have always tried to perhaps make Islam perhaps guilty of this accusation, right? And they are, of course, this is not the only case, but we know the cases of Al-Qaeda, and so on. The bombing that happened in New York and other places, the embassy in Kenya and Tanzania and places like that. But really, if you spend some time and study Islam and you really understand the details of this teaching with regards to this issue of jihad, it is clear that in fact, many of the scholars of the countries from the Muslim world, such as in Saudi Arabia and Egypt, there's that position called Mufti. So the Mufti of Saudi Arabia and Egypt is like the highest religious or spiritual position in the country. These individuals issued a fatwa or a religious ruling regarding the question of jihad and those who call upon the destruction and the killing of others in the name of jihad. And clearly, if you read their narrative and their articulation on the subject and the explanation that they offer, it clearly explains, none of that comes to the attention of the media here, unfortunately, but their websites that they have, these individuals and so on, and it clearly explains that this has got nothing to do with Islam. This is just individuals who misinterpret this word. They want to justify their actions using religion, but in actuality, the religion is innocent and far removed from this accusation. Are you still there? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, it's just that the only times that, I don't study Islam, the only times I've heard the word jihad has been associated with mass murder of people. And so it's just, there's a disconnect between the way you described it in your presentation, which may be the way
Well, I don't know if
there's
there's a disconnect because you're talking about the actions of 0.1% of the Muslim population out of 1.7 billion.
Right, but they're the actions that make a difference.
So if you ask us about the connect that those of us have that don't agree with that individual, then there's a lot of connection to what I say. And right here, they're Muslims, and they'll tell you how they feel about it. But I think my explanation, many of the Muslims in here agree. If there's anyone, just raise your hand so that we know, and you can give us a different viewpoint. But many of the Muslims, see, I don't know. I'm yet to meet a person who has given me a jihad explanation other than this one. I tend to read about it like you do. Once in a while in a newspaper, somebody committed an act like that. But among the many thousands of Muslims I've met in my life, I have never met anybody who holds to that kind of view. So these are really isolated individuals, very removed from the reality and the truth about Islam, and doesn't certainly represent the truth of the religion. Yeah.
I thought that in your presentation, maybe that you could have at least stressed that other, because even if it's a minority, but it still needs to be addressed because there are some people who believe one way and another, and for other people who don't practice Islam, this is what the side that we see, so it needs to be addressed.
And unfortunately, 25 minutes is only so much I can say. But now that we're talking in the question and answer format, then this will be an additional detail that certainly we can talk. And even after the discussion, if you want to talk to me in person, I'll be happy to go over the details, some more details about jihad, because that's an entire lecture on its own. And I've done one here on campus several years back, what is jihad? And it was almost like a 45-minute presentation, looking at all the details about that subject matter. But in the few minutes that I had, that's as much as I could say. So I hope you appreciate that the subject is more than that, certainly. More questions? No? Thank you.
I'm sorry, do one more real quick.
Yes, please. Yes.
And as a lot of the things that we see when we look at some of the extreme behavior that's happened, if you peel it back, it appears quite frequently that those areas that are most prone are those areas that are most economically disadvantaged. And certainly one of the concerns in several countries that have a predominantly Islamic faith is a great discrepancy between the wealthiest individuals and the least wealthy individuals. Do you ever see a time where the religious influence of Islam is focused more on trying to pressure those individuals towards a greater distribution of wealth to try and alleviate some of the more extremist areas of growth?
The religion itself, if you look at the issue of the economics, which are quite articulated in the teachings of Islam and the distribution of wealth and so on, Islam is really a religion that encourages equitable distribution of wealth. Okay? And these big gaps that we see, of course, many other factors that come in. Obviously, not everybody is practicing Islam the way it should be practiced, and so on. And this thing called zakat, which we talked about briefly, the issue of giving charity, it's really a mandated thing in Islam. It's part of the religion, you have to give it. And it's 2.5%, for example, of your wealth that you give to the poor and the needy, right? So they did a study some years back, and they found that if every Muslim gave that percentage of their wealth to the poor and the needy in those countries where there are a lot of poor Muslims, probably there will be no poor Muslim living in those countries, right? Right here in America, I think they found that because there's a lot of well-to-do Muslims in this country. A lot of the Muslims that came to this country came for education. And so even here in Davidson County, when they published a report some 3-4 years back, they found that an average family, which, we would say a Muslim family in America, earns more than an average American family. Because many of them came for higher education, right? They came here, they ended up being doctors, professors, engineers, scientists, and so on. So if you take their wealth that they need to give, as stipulated in Islam, some figure that was given by a person in New York was like $15 billion or something like that, just in America alone. And if you translate that worldwide, then you can imagine the amount of wealth that Muslims command, and they just don't give it out the way they're supposed to give it out. And the reason why that is instituted in Islam, so that the state doesn't have to take the entire burden of taking care of the poor and the needy, that Muslims themselves, out of this obligation, will do so and alleviate the state from the unemployment benefits that you have to give and taking care of those less fortunate and so on. Unfortunately, this is not well practiced and done. Yes, sir.
A lot of people quoted in the New York Times reading some of the work of Todd Friedman. As I understand his point, that I think he agrees with you as well, that we're talking about small minorities who are doing things that the private majorities don't understand. But I think it's Friedman's point is that there's at least a perception of silence from the Muslim community that's perceived by others as acceptance, and that the Christians, the Jews, the Hindus will never be able to deal with extremists outside of their own cultures and religions. Can you talk about, as a Muslim, what can be done to try to deal with the extremism and sort of replace it with education and understanding